So real quick, I'm going to show you the difference between Etch, Farcaster, and Lens. These are all blockchain-based decentralized protocols, and I'm going to show you why Etch is the best one. And I'll also, if you didn't look at it, my last video showed how Etch fits into Nostr and Blue Sky. Basically, Etch is already a first-class citizen of Nostr and Blue Sky, even though Blue Sky is more centralized. It's already a first-class city. It has access to all the Nostr and Blue Sky data, and it has users. You're already a user in Nostr and Blue Sky. So these are already done, out of the way, boom, right? But I'm taking that data, right, that you're posting onto both these, Etch is posting onto both of those, and then I'm putting it onto the blockchain, right? So that if all this disappears, this data is still on chain, right? Your posts. Now it's just relaying the data onto the blockchain, right? So if in 1,000 years these disappeared, you could recreate these networks from this data that's on chain. It's essentially immortalizing the data, the posts themselves. And on Etch, you can make posts that are not on chain. You can just make some regular Nostr posts and B-Sky posts, and they're not even on chain if you want them to disappear. And what else is not on chain is the user, right? Because your personal data should be private. There's no reason for your personal data to be on chain. That's ridiculous. So it's just a private key. You put that in your pocket and you save that. And if you ever come back, later, hundreds of years after all this, you can come back, and because these are all signed by your private key, right, you could actually recreate the network and you can figure out who posted all of these posts, because it's all linked to a digital encrypted signature that you signed in the first place. So your special key is on the bottom of all of these posts, right? I mean, it signs the whole thing. So everyone knows that the person with some private key, they don't know the private key itself, signed it. And you can take this key and you can go back to like the Nostr network or other networks in the future. So say if there was like a goat network and a fish network and a bear network, right? Like they can all save data here and they don't need anyone's permission. This is just called ERC 7847, and it's just a format. And so people could just post directly to another app besides Etch could come along and also grab more posts and put them on chain, or somebody could make a smart contract that just posts in that format. So it's completely open. There's no gatekeeping, okay? Now the reason why Farcaster is not ideal is because what they do is they put the users on chain, right? And the data, the posts, are off chain. And you might be going, what? It doesn't make any sense at all. So the part that you would want to be private, the user and the relationship between the users and who you follow and what's your social graph, which is just an evil thing. You don't even really need a social graph to create a social network. Actually, it's something Mark Zuckerberg decided to create. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but basically social graphs, bad, right? But they put this part on chain, and then so the part that you want to live forever, right, the content, the part that you would hope would survive the test of time, this is just, this is ephemeral. It's like, it doesn't matter to them. They have a series of complex smart contracts that puts this social graph on chain, and what's worse is that you have to go, if you're a user, right, you have to go through Farcaster. Farcaster's smart contract. They are the gatekeeper, and it is locked down, right? So they actually have special admin permissions called owner only or whatever. It's on the smart contract where the guy who created it, I think his name is Dan Ramiro or something. The guy who created it and his company, the Farcaster company, has special privileges on this smart contract, and everybody who wants to create a user on this network has to go through Farcaster. And in fact, it was invite only to start. So they just flip that switch on and off. So they're saving your personal information on chain, and your actual content is being saved off chain. I mean, there's people who probably put some of that content on chain, but there's absolutely no reason to have your users and have a social graph on chain. So they've done it the reverse of how you would think that a decentralized social, everything has to go through them. This is a closed network. You can't, a new app, some other app, so say you made like a goat app, right? The goat app can't just bypass Farcaster and be part of the network. They have to go through Farcaster, right? And they have to ask permission. Hey, can I please join your network? Whereas this over here is just a free, open standard that anybody can contribute to, and anybody can create to just start adding to this social network, and all the data is in the correct format. And in order to create a user, you just create a private key. It's the same way you do with crypto. A private key is the user. Over here, your users have private keys too, but they also have users on a smart contract for some reason. So over here, as a user, it's just in your private wallet. It's off chain. Nobody knows who you're following. I mean, unless you're using a network where it's keeping track of that, you could create software where everything, like who you follow, what you look at, is completely secret, right? You can post on there. Nobody knows like what the graph is, the relationship between users, because it's just, there's a bunch of signed content on chain, and then your user is just it's just your wallet key. And when you make content, you just sign some content and you put it on there, and then it's up to people to collate that. And then you have convenience apps like Etch who come and put that together and make it easier to use. But if you want it to be like some crazy whistleblower or something, you could just post directly into the network, and nobody would know who you are, which is like how it should be. And this is like censorship resistant and long lasting and all that. When I say censorship resistant, it just means that blockchains exist outside of the internet. And that sounds like something funny to say, but the thing is, the internet helps you access blockchains. I don't know how to write that on here. The internet helps you access blockchains, but blockchains are just identical copies of the same data on a bunch of different computers. So anywhere you can get access to that copy of the blockchain, you have access to these to the blockchain internet. So it's just you need the internet to find blockchains and to communicate with them. But if you cut off part of the internet and you were able to find the blockchain from some other part of the internet, you can, it's fault tolerant, essentially. You could get back to the same data. Whereas in like Farcaster, if you had access to the blockchain, somebody could, you still need to have, you need the regular internet to get the content, right? So like if a part of the internet was missing that had the content you wanted, you actually couldn't see that content. Whereas here, if you had access to the blockchain, wherever you could find it, you still actually have access to the actual content. Now, I don't know as much about Lens, but the fact that it's also a bunch of smart contracts instead of just saving content on, so they still have they still have a filter, like you have to go through their smart contracts, right? Everyone has to go through Lens's smart contracts in order to post Lens data to the blockchain, right? So if you're the Fish network and you're the Goat network, you have to go through Lens, right? Which makes it centralized. So they call it decentralized, but it's centralized, like Farcaster. Lens, I believe, doesn't have the same amount of controlled admin privilege contracts. I'm not sure about that. They do post more content on chain, but the problem is it's still the wrong things that they're putting on chain. They have smart contracts, which they shouldn't need smart contracts, and they have the social graph on chain. So you still have to make an ID. You still need to make a user in Lens that gets put on chain, which is redundant to the fact that you have a blockchain wallet already. So users have a private key, right? They have a private key, but they also have an ID, right? Which is it's just redundant, right? Like in a really decentralized system over here, a user can just post direct content. They don't need to go through anybody's smart contract. They don't need to create an ID. They just create some content and it's signed by their private key. So there's just no reason to have to create an ID and a centralized smart contract anywhere like Lens or Farcaster. And the reason why these companies do this, of course, is for like fundraising purposes. Like, this is our network. We control it. You have to go through us. So we have a moat. Give us money. We can raise money. It's harder to raise money on something that's more like a public good, like ERC 7847. I might integrate with Lens at some point, even though it's an overhead of making a new ID, but I don't think I ever will with Farcaster because they could just cut me off at any time, which is just anti-competitive. Like on Nostr, they can't ever cut you off because it's an open protocol. On Farcaster, they could just cut off any app they don't like at any time. And that's how it works.